On June 11, 2025, Brian Wilson closed his eyes for the last time and the world went wild with celebration. The radio played Good Vibrations repeatedly. According to Paul McCartney, he is the most significant figure in the history of music. However, in all of these recollections, one voice has remained silent, until now. For more than 45 years, Marilyn Ravevel, Brian's first wife, had remained silent about their relationship, despite having witnessed both his most painful and artistic moments. She did something no one expected her to do after he passed away. Her handwritten note would permanently alter our understanding of the most disturbed mind in music. It wasn't just another well-known ex-wife vying for attention. Marilyn's private letter to their girls, which she chose not to publish to tabloids, has so many intimate details that it alters our perception of the guy behind Pet Sounds. She said, "I used to hope Brian would get out of the crazy world he was drowning in, but then I understood that no one from the outside could save it." Her timing is so remarkable for more reasons than merely breaking decades of silence. Her remarks highlight the stark contrast between Wilson's bright California music and the mental gloom that is engulfing him. The reason Marilyn was so missing from her story for nearly 50 years is more stunning than what she wrote. While everyone was celebrating a musical talent, she had witnessed something even more terrifying, a brilliant mind disintegrating before her very eyes. 6 days after Brian Wilson's death, a 2-page letter was mailed to Carney Wilson's home, shocking the music industry. It was sent by Marilyn Ravevel Wilson. She is the mother of his children and his first wife. This letter's date stood out, but so did the fact that it was written at all. Since their breakup in 1979, Marilyn had never mentioned Brian on the radio or in any other way. There had been no documentaries, no memoirs, no interviews, nothing. She seemed to have vanished entirely from his narrative. "I loved Brian with all my heart" was part of the June 5 message, which was composed before he passed away, but as his health was rapidly deteriorating. The only person who could truly comprehend how they were disintegrating was that individual. This was Brian's last admission of a section that had been left out of his public narrative, not an irate ex-wife seeking revenge. While her father was being buried, Carney held on to the letter. Following the service, there was a private family get-together where parts were read aloud. This was done as a last admission of facts that were too painful to discuss while Brian was still alive, not for notoriety. The most striking thing about the man whose musical ideas revolutionized popular culture while his personal life broke apart was Marilyn's straightforward but sad description of Brian as a soul that couldn't exist in reality. In 1962, as the Beach Boys were gaining popularity, Brian, who was 19 at the time, met Marilyn Ravevel, who was 15 at the time and a member of the Honeys. Despite the wishes of Brian's domineering father, Murray, they were married in December 1964. Brian was 22 and Marilyn was just 17. The mental health issues that would define Brian's life were already manifesting. Brian was at the height of his creative abilities during their marriage. He had given up touring in order to concentrate on recording songs in the studio, where he stretched the boundaries of pop music and revolutionized record production. Marilyn noticed something quite different at home as the rest of the world fell in love with sunny cheerfulness. Marilyn witnessed Brian's conduct becoming increasingly erratic during the 1966 sessions for Pet Sounds, which is now regarded as one of the greatest records ever made. For days, he would work tirelessly before falling asleep, unable to accomplish anything. The songs You Still Believe in Me and Caroline No, which were disguised as lovely music, were actually cries for assistance. He was not calmed by their 2 daughters, Wendy 1969 and Carney 1968. Being a dad, if anything, hastened his decline. Marilyn was raising their daughters alone when the Huge Smile project failed, and she had to deal with a husband who would spend weeks at a time in his room. By the early 1970s, Marilyn had transitioned from being a wife to a full-time babysitter. Brian transitioned from occasional LSD use to heavy cocaine, amphetamines, and alcohol use. He overate while lying in bed for days at a time, which caused him to acquire a lot of weight. "There were times when I had to dress him myself," she stated. "I would put food next to the bed and come back to find it empty." He was certain he could hear messages in the air conditioner, so he would spend hours staring at the ceiling. Marilyn not only attended to Brian's medical needs throughout this period, but she also prevented their young daughters from learning the real truth. "Daddy is in bed, but why? When a 5-year-old's mind is telling him negative things, what should you tell him?" she inquired in her letter. After nearly 15 years of marriage, Marilyn filed for divorce from Brian in 1979. At the time, neither the tabloids nor the tell-all talks featured arguments over Brian's wealth. She simply lost interest in Brian's story and the marriage. There had never been a division like this. Marilyn didn't keep in touch with the public, unlike other famous artists' ex-spouses. She remained silent for over 45 years. She writes in her statement, "Leaving Brian wasn't leaving a marriage, it was admitting that I couldn't save someone who was drowning in his own thoughts." She severed all ties with them in order to protect herself and their girls. Your life will never be the same if you meet Melinda Ledbetter, who was employed at a Cadillac dealership in 1986. All aspects of Brian's life were still under the authority of Dr. Eugene Landy at that time. When Melinda realized that Landy was abusing her, she made an effort to document his mistreatment. Landy was ordered to leave Brian by a court in 1991. After getting married in 1995, Brian and Melinda's lives became more secure. He completed Smile with her assistance, returned to the road, and at last received the recognition he so richly deserved. "I was grateful that Melinda could provide what Brian needed in ways I couldn't," Marilyn writes in her letter. This acknowledges this chapter with an unexpected degree of grace. The Brian she married was not the same as the one I knew. The scene following Melinda is the most poignant in Marilyn's letter. Although Marilyn had avoided contact with Brian, she had been surreptitiously monitoring him through family connections. "I knew right away what it would mean for Brian when I heard about Melinda's death in early 2024, she stated. His memory deteriorated more quickly without Melinda to cling to. Even though he knew Melinda was dead, he kept begging for her. Even the note Marilyn sent to Brian was left on the piano where he composed early Beach Boys songs. However, Brian's sickness likely prevented him from ever reading it. I wanted him to know that the years we spent together were still important to me, no matter what. The cycle that started when they first met as youths was broken by this action. The world was immediately saddened by Brian Wilson's death on June 11th, 2025. Radio stations played Beach Boys songs repeatedly and celebrities paid their respects. However, the most significant response was provided by a woman who had witnessed both the beginning and the breaking moment. It was really calm and handwritten. She said in the end, Brian's music was the clearest expression of who he really was. Beautiful, complex, innovative, and ultimately unable to fit into the structures of everyday life. Her realization alters Wilson's reputation by demonstrating that his mental suffering and musical brilliance were inextricably linked. Unlike many of their former lovers, Marilyn did not profit from her connections with celebrities. For nearly 50 years, she opted for respect and seclusion instead. "I didn't want to be a part of Brian's story anymore," she ultimately stated, "but I cared about what happened to him all the time. Now that he's gone, I hope he's finally found the balance he was seeking in life, the harmony he could achieve in music but never fully experienced in his head." Being Brian Wilson's daughters, Carney and Wendy Wilson, had a difficult childhood because they didn't spend much time with their father. With Wilson Phillips, they both rose to fame as artists and achieved success with songs like Hold On and Release Me. A distinct legacy is left by their achievements, one that both acknowledges their father's genius and forges their own identities. They were able to better grasp the man whose mind had lost some of them thanks to the background information provided by Marilyn's letter. Parts of the letter were read aloud during the private celebration that followed Brian's funeral, and Carney held it up as a last acknowledgement of a chapter that had been omitted from the public narrative. It was the conclusion of a circle that started when Marilyn and Brian first met as children. The music of Brian Wilson will endure forever. Without a question, one of the greatest records ever produced is Pet Sounds. Good Vibrations will continue to be examined because of its innovative production. However, Marilyn Ravevel's much-anticipated remarks provide crucial context. They tell us that there was a man battling demons that most people could never comprehend behind the sun-drenched music. Torment his hellevere is the highs and lows of his intelligent but unstable mind. Her decision to come forward until after his death and in secret reveals a great deal about her personality and the complexity of their relationship. Brian's music originated from a location that was inaccessible to many. Marilyn's letter so demonstrates that he was unable to fully inhabit the reality that the rest of us inhabit. I hope that finally the harmony he made in sound has made its way into his heart. These straightforward, sincere remarks were written by the lady who knew him at both his artistic zenith and his breaking point. They might be the most authentic homage to one of the most significant and tortured minds in music. The way we perceive the world has been altered by the noises produced by Brian Wilson. The decision of Marilyn Ravevel Wilson to finally come forward has given us greater insight into the man who made those sounds. Brian Wilson undoubtedly had a significant influence on the music industry. By utilizing intricate rhythms and innovative techniques to create music that was years ahead of its time, his tunes, such as Good Vibrations, altered the parameters of what pop music might be. His recordings, such as the seminal Pet Sounds album and his collaborations with the Beach Boys, have a significant influence on modern music. Marilyn Ravevel's letter, however, demonstrates that this brilliance came at an unthinkable cost. Despite the beauty of his music, most people were unaware of the soul that was suffering from a serious mental illness. The unfortunate aspect of Brian's life is that he was occasionally extremely irate in addition to being extremely intelligent. His mind, which had the capacity to create harmony that would endure forever, was also the source of his pain and the cause of his loneliness, substance misuse, and severe mental health issues. Marilyn's letter eloquently described how she watched the person she loved gradually deteriorate. It was an agonizing journey that began with the young aspirational musician she married and finished with a man struggling to define himself and his true self. The Beach Boys' image of a sun-kissed idyllic California was popular, but the reality was far more sinister. Marilyn's decision to speak out after his passing allows us to understand more about the man behind the music. It demonstrates the sacrifices made by people who loved him, including herself. It also demonstrates how his mental health impacted those closest to him as well as his music. Marilyn endured a great deal while tending to a man who was disintegrating before her very eyes. Too long this story had been kept under wraps. Marilyn, however, wasn't looking for fault or stirring up controversy when she did speak out. She provided us with a more complete image of Brian Wilson by revealing a complex and an intensely intimate fact about him. He was a genius whose musical abilities were connected to his mental health issues. Marilyn has helped us comprehend what it is to be truly talented and how much it can damage a person, especially when that genius is combined with profound, unresolved pain, by revealing a side of his life that isn't often visible. Writing the letter gave Marilyn peace, and the way she quietly shared it with her kids is a lesson in kindness. By avoiding him for decades and not exploiting their past together, she made the decision to respect Brian's memory and her own mental well-being. Many others in the same circumstance might not have treated her with the civility and respect that she did. Her choice to discuss it at last after his passing demonstrates how much she still loved and cared about him. Marilyn's letter serves as more than just a farewell. It's also a significant method for us to consider the life and work of Brian Wilson. It reminds us that sometimes the most significant things are the stories behind the music, and that brilliance frequently comes at a price. This demonstrates how difficult life can be, and how frequently we overlook the sacrifices made by individuals we love for those we look up to. As we continue to celebrate Brian Wilson's tremendous contributions to music, let's not forget the guy who created it, his hardships, his suffering, and the people who loved him. The final remarks made by Marilyn and Brian regarding their time together signal the end of a wonderful but depressing relationship. We can discover more about the individual who created the enduring sounds by listening to them.